Hey everyone, I'm Fox with Foxio Games, and this is Shadow Warrior, the 2013 version on the PC. It's also available on Linux, Mac, PS4, and Xbox One. Shadow Warrior was released in 2013, but as with most games, I waited to pick this one up on sale. Hey, I'm cheap like that. Shadow Warrior is a spiritual remake of the 1997 PC title of the same name. The original ran on the same game engine as Duke Nukem 3D, and it really showed. The remake is a modernized version of the traditional PC first-person shooter, reminding me of the last game I reviewed, Hard Reset. In fact, the menus are virtually identical minus the different color palette. This is a fast-paced, action-packed first-person shooter that mimics the games of old while introducing new, more modern game design. Let's start out with the PC port. Shadow Warrior feels native to the PC, featuring most of the options you'd expect. There are various gameplay and HUD options, including the ability to remove hints and the blinking feature for collectible items. Thankfully, you can also disable the blur effect, something I'm not a fan of. Graphics options include field of view, gamma, full screen or windowed, graphics chipset selection, refresh rate up to 144Hz, aspect ratio, resolution up to my max of 1920 by 1080, VSync with triple buffering, anti-aliasing using FXAA, which is not the best, and then a handful of drop-down menus for those things like texture quality, anisotropic filtering, screen space ambient occlusion, etc. I would have liked a borderless full screen mode, but again, this doesn't show up in a lot of games. Audio options only allow you to change global volume, music, and voices, no separation for sound effects. Key binding is available, and the game works well with the Xbox One or 360 controllers, but why would you want to use one of those on a first-person shooter on PC? Performance is solid. With most settings maxed or nearly maxed out, only leaving shadows turned down a bit, I achieved over 100 frames per second for most of the game, with a few drops below that. You can see my system specs here on the screen. Overall, it's a solid port with an abundance of options and excellent performance. Shadow Warrior has a very prominent art direction and aesthetic. In fact, sometimes it's too prominent, relying too heavily on bright, shimmering objects. Just like Deus Ex Human Revolution, everything in the game has this sort of unique otherworldly feel thanks to the art direction and color choice. The game features a lot of red and gold, the two colors most associated with China. Speaking of China, the game features what is either intentionally confusing or ignorantly bad mishmash of various Asian cultures. The main protagonist, known as Lo Wang, drives a car with a Japanese license plate and wields a Japanese-style katana, although his name is clearly derived from Chinese origin. Japanese samurai designs and Shinto shrine posts litter the world right next to statues reminiscent of traditional Chinese sculptures and the uniquely Chinese dragon. It's mostly an odd, confusing blend of whatever has been traditionally seen as Asian from an American perspective, blending and mixing up Chinese and Japanese cultures. There may be tidbits of other Asian cultures in there as well, for all I know. I don't think this is offensive because the game is clearly trying to poke fun at many traditional Asian stereotypes as held by Americans. The game features mostly simple and somewhat dated textures, which of course is the primary reason it can run so well on most gaming machines. They don't look bad per se, but they certainly aren't Witcher 3 quality. Water, fire, and particle effects all look pretty good, and the game features a good contrast of light and dark areas. There are a variety of interesting settings, including Asian-styled building interiors, caves, bamboo forests, and more. Combat effects are solid and look great, and when you break something, it shatters into numerous little pieces. Unfortunately, some of the textures are pretty bad, particularly things like the trees and some of the walls. It's best not to look too closely at the details in this game and just enjoy the graphics as a whole. While the monster creatures look great, the human characters in the game can be a bit distracting given how simple they look. Again, this is absolutely no Witcher 3 here. You should tailor your expectations accordingly, and I recommend that you just imagine a modernized, post-processed version of the graphics you might have seen in games from many years ago. Also, there's a strange kind of jitter on some of the graphics on my system, and I'm not sure what it is. At first I thought it was a low frame rate, but it only happens on certain surfaces at certain times. It's hard to explain, but let me know if you notice it. On to the sound and music. Sound effects in the game are pretty cool, and other than being a bit loud at times, they seemed well engineered. There are unique background sounds to set the atmosphere as well. Combat sounds are sometimes very satisfying, but the guns in the game lack that punch of modern recoil-based shooters. But again, this game isn't trying to be one of those shooters. It's a callback to the first-person PC shooters of old. The music is really mediocre. None of it really stands out at all. It's almost entirely just atmospheric, minimalist stuff that won't really make itself known, but does prevent the game from being dead silent at times. The good news is that I never found it annoying or bad, just nothing special or worth drawing attention to. The voice work, however, is pretty stellar. It's intentionally cheesy, filled with eye-rollingly silly puns and lots of sarcastic quips and one-liners.
You have a cave under your house where you keep your battle suit? Glad to see you're keeping your superhero complex in check.
Laugh all you want, but who's the guy with his sweet suit of armor ready to go in case of a zombie apocalypse? Turned out it's a demon apocalypse. Still, not a bad time to be a superhero.
A demon that follows you around will often crack jokes, and your character likes to mock stuff in the game. The story in Shadow Warrior is worth paying attention to, not because it's uniquely deep or complex or emotional or anything like that, but because it's straight up unapologetically cheesy. It's intentionally simple and lame at times, and this just adds to the game's charm. Think Duke Nukem in an Asian setting and you've got an idea of what to expect, though in this game the protagonist is a lot more talkative. By now it should be no surprise whatsoever that Shadow Warrior features old school style first person action combat with a modern twist. You don't take cover, you just move and attack, move and attack. The swordplay separates it from other games, and unlike many shooters with melee weapons, this one works really well. I often found myself preferring the sword over the available guns in the game. As mentioned earlier, the guns do lack that punch you expect from modern shooters, but the sword certainly doesn't. In addition to shooting your firearms and swinging your sword, you also have a variety of unique moves you can unlock through upgrades. You start out with a simple swing and charged attack along with throwable shurikens. And yes, I know, shuriken is the way you say it in Japanese, but we pronounce it shuriken. I just want to clarify that. I do know how to pronounce it in Japanese. Later, you get the ability to use uniquely powerful attacks with the sword as well as heal yourself. The controls for these special moves are really awkward, and I had a hard time remembering them. One of the charged thrust attacks require that you tap forward twice, then hold the attack button. That, if you're using the mouse and keyboard, that's WW left mouse. Healing requires you to tap the right direction key twice, then hold the right mouse button. So if you're using mouse and keyboard, that would be D, right mouse button, hold. I can't stress enough that this was one of the most disappointing things in the game for me. I mean, couldn't they have come up with a better system than these awkward, easy to forget button tapping combos? You mostly progress through the game by collecting keys, kinda like the key cards you'd find in the original Doom. You also sometimes have to find and destroy these special statues to unlock force field-like obstructions. Health is measured by percentage, and you can heal with your magic spell or collect consumable healing items as well as bullets and money for upgrades. As you collect karma points, you can then use these for additional upgrades such as resistance to fire, better healing, or higher HP. On the whole, the gameplay should be pretty self-evident from the footage you're seeing. Whether you focus more on swordplay or gunplay is up to you, but I prefer the sword myself. The game should take you somewhere between 12 to 15 hours to complete, and it can get a bit repetitive as you kill the same enemies over and over. But again, I have to emphasize that this game is intentionally trying to invoke that nostalgic old-school first-person shooter feel. If you think back to Doom, remember, you were killing only a handful of enemies repeatedly for level after level. So what's my final verdict? I wouldn't pay the current full price of $40 on Steam. I picked it up during a drastic sale and recommend you wait until it's at least half off. Shadow Warrior is a fun, modern take on the old school PC first-person shooter, and it's easy to pick up and play. It provides just enough gameplay and story to be satisfying without getting too stale, and it also runs well and feels native to the PC platform. Have you played Shadow Warrior? Are you a fan of the original game from 1997? If so, how does this remake compare in your opinion? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up button, check the video description for links to my Twitter and Facebook, and make sure to follow me on Twitch TV for future live streams. Don't forget to subscribe before you leave. I'm Fox with Foxio Games, and I'll see you around.